Hi everyone, it's Melissa, and today I am going to be talking about everything that I read and watched for Jane Austen July. So I'm going to do this in the order of the prompts for Jane Austen July. So the first prompt was to read one of Jane Austen's main 6 novels. So first of all, I reread Pride and Prejudice, so I won't really talk about that at length since this was a reread for me, but one thing that kind of stood out is that I had a bit more sympathy for Mrs. Bennet during this reading of it, and I am going to link below Katie's video that she did talking about Mrs. Bennet as a character, which I think was a fabulous video. And I also had more sympathy for Lydia as well. Not that I was unsympathetic to them entirely the first time I read Pride and Prejudice, but I just had a little bit more compassion for the both of them, or maybe understood both of them a little bit better, picked up more things on the reread. So that was the first thing. Oh, and I read this on via audio, and it was narrated by Rosamund. Is it Rosamund Pike? I think that's her name. But I will link all of the titles below. The second thing that I read for a main 6 novel was, I have this one, was Northanger Abbey. And this is the book kind of satirizing Gothic fiction. It follows I think 17-year-old protagonist, Catherine Morland, who is very naive, and she goes to Bath with family friends, and this is her first time leaving home, her first experience out in the world. I will also link another one of Katie's videos where she and her husband Nick just discuss Northanger Abbey, and I thought that they did an excellent job. And I liked this a lot. This tends to rank lower on, like, where I've seen people kind of rank their favorite Austen novels. This tends to rank lower than I would put it. So I think that's because maybe, like, the characters aren't as fully formed, especially the leads, Catherine Morland and her, like, romantic interest, could use more development. And there's some other secondary characters as well who could have done with being a bit more fully formed, and maybe the addition of a few scenes could have made this a more robust novel. So I get why some people don't like this as much as others, but I have just, this Jane Austen July, I have come to find out that the humor is what really sells me on a lot of Jane Austen's works. It's obviously not the only thing I like about them. I love what she does with characters, and, like, there are lots of things I like about her books, but I've just come to realize that humor is up there pretty high for me. And this is definitely one of her, maybe even her funniest book that I've read. It has, obviously there's the satirical element, but just she's just poking fun at, I think, even herself a little bit throughout this novel. There's a lot of, like, kind of like winking to the reader and breaking of the fourth wall, that kind of stuff. And I just really enjoyed this. So, like I said, it's a naive main character, and one thing that the character does is her imagination runs away with her a little bit. She's really into Gothic fiction, especially she keeps bringing up the book, what's that Anne Radcliffe book? Mysteries of Udolpho, and she's kind of obsessed with that book in particular, but with Gothic fiction, and she's invited eventually in this book to Northanger Abbey to spend some time with new friends that she's made in Bath, and her imagination gets away with her a little bit and lands her into some trouble. But yeah, I thought this was really funny. I know the characters could have been better, but I just really enjoyed the kind of nudges to the reader, and I did enjoy, like, the story and the naive nature of the main character I thought made for an interesting story, and I really, really enjoyed the antagonists in this book. So that's Northanger Abbey. And the last book I read for the first prompt was Persuasion, and this was probably my least favorite Jane Austen. Caveat that I don't hate anything that I read by Jane Austen, so by saying that I'm not saying, oh, I really hated Persuasion, but I enjoyed it, but it didn't really go beyond that for me. Although I suspect I will probably like this more on a reread. I read it on audiobook. I have forgotten the narrator, so I'll make sure that it's in the description below. And it wasn't necessarily anything to do with the narration. I just think I was missing key bits. I don't think I was keeping the characters as straight in my head, because there are a lot of characters in Jane Austen's novels. A lot of, cousins and acquaintances and so on and so forth. And I just think I was missing a lot of nuance between, interactions between characters, and yeah, I think it was a mistake to read it for the first time on audio. I just feel like I was missing some nuance. This is Jane Austen's novel where the main character is a lot older than in her other novels. She's only 27, but in the Regency period, you're getting, for a woman, on in years, maybe getting past marriageable age. And we follow the main character of Anne Elliot, who, like I said, is 27, maybe even 28. And she is very quiet, reserved, has a strong sense of duty and doing the right thing. And because of that, she is convinced by someone who is a mother figure to her, kind of a mentor. Earlier in her youth, she's convinced by this woman to reject her love, Captain Wentworth. And I don't think I would say she regrets this. She definitely still loves him, and she feels like she did the right thing, that she listened to this person, that this wasn't going to be a good match. But then she just never ends up marrying, and she thinks about him. And then he is brought back into her life when his relatives, I think it's his sister and brother-in-law, rent out her family's estate because her family is not as responsible as she is, and I think they had some money problems, and they had to kind of rent out their place and stay somewhere else. And I loved Anne Elliot as a character. It was nice to see a character that was more mature, quiet, reserved. I think I said this in a Friday Reads, but she's not your Lizzie Bennet. She's not your Emma Woodhouse. She's a very different character. But although she is this kind of more quiet and responsible, sensible character, she's not, I wouldn't call her necessarily passive or anything like that. I think she's very sure of herself and her convictions, and has a strong sense of, the thing to do and the thing not to do. And I really liked her as a character. And I liked the kind of second chance romance aspect of this book, and that we have a character who has had some life experience, who isn't naive. So that was the highlight of the book for me, to have this somewhat older character who has learned from her past and is a more kind of sure-footed character. But otherwise, I found other bits of the novel to be a bit dull. I did like some of the secondary characters, especially Anne's family, who are embarrassments in different ways, her father and her two sisters, but it didn't have the kind of breadth of secondary characters that bring a lot of life to the story like some of the other novels have, in my opinion. Harking back to Northanger Abbey, which I really enjoyed and was really funny, I think Persuasion's probably the least funny Austen I've read so far. Not to say that there's no humor, there's still all the humor and wit that Austen brings to her novels, but the humor is toned down a lot. Maybe that means this is a more mature novel. Austen's humor is something that I have discovered is a major element for me enjoying the book. So that's why, although I liked it, I didn't end up loving it. So that was prompt 1. Prompt 2 was to read something that was not one of the main 6 novels, and I read Lady Susan. And I'm not going to say too much about this one because it's so short. It's a novella, but I think it's even quite short, even by that standard. It's about a very manipulative woman called Lady Susan, and she just wants to get what she wants, even at the expense of her daughter's happiness. She wants what she wants. She wants her daughter to marry who she wants her daughter to marry, and there are other characters that she wants for herself. She has no problem ruining other people's relationships to get what she wants. And this is another one that I really liked. I didn't end up loving it. I just don't think there was enough here to grab onto. It was told in epistolary format, which at first I wasn't really a fan of, but after discussion in the Goodreads group, someone was talking about kind of the importance of it being told through letters and how we're only getting very specific perspectives on what's happening. And because we're not there in the action, we don't really know the full extent. So like Lady Susan's probably not being entirely truthful, but other people who are already prejudiced against her might also not be telling the full story or might be predisposed to dislike her. So on reflection, I think maybe, like, I'm sure the epistolary format was done for a reason. So I've warmed to that, but I just think I needed a whole lot more to this story because I wanted more interaction between Lady Susan and other characters. I wanted to see more of that. Even if it was through letters, I wanted more. But it was a lot of good fun, and that Austen humor was definitely there. For the third prompt, nonfiction, about Jane Austen or her time. I'm not done this, so I'm not going to review it in full, but I forgot to bring it with me, but I am reading right now, I'll insert in picture, The Time Traveler's Guide to Regency Britain, and first impressions are good. I'm only, I think, on the 3rd or 4th chapter, but overall, I'm learning a lot. I feel it's very accessible, but it has tons of information, so even if you know a fair bit about the Regency period, you'll probably get at least something out of this book. The 4th prompt was to read a retelling, essentially, of a Jane Austen novel, and I read Longborn by Jo Baker. So this is set during the time span of Pride and Prejudice, but it's the servant's story. And I don't know if it was just my misunderstanding of other people talking about it, or if it was other people maybe not explaining it well, but I thought I heard people kind of recommending this as like a Pride and Prejudice retelling, but like through the servant's eyes. I wouldn't say that, because to me that means like the servants are talking amongst themselves about what's going on with the family and like what's happening with the Bennet girls, and that's really not what this book is. So that's what I was going into this thinking I was getting, was a book about Pride and Prejudice, like the love stories in Pride and Prejudice, but through the servant's perspective, when really this is a book about the servants' lives. And Pride and Prejudice, the events of Pride and Prejudice are happening out in the periphery, and the servants aren't really like bothered by what's happening, which, why would they be, really, I guess, is fair enough. So I did end up enjoying Longborn, but only after I started reading it a different way. So what I didn't like about it, not all, but most of the Pride and Prejudice characters who are in the book, but like I said, on the periphery, I don't think that they didn't feel like the characters in this book. Lizzie did not feel like Lizzie to me. Mr. Bennet didn't really feel like Mr. Bennet to me. Wickham didn't feel like Wickham to me. I just feel like the characters didn't feel like the characters. And obviously when you're reading fan fiction, you have to just kind of be okay with the author taking liberties and doing other things with the characters, and exploring them in different ways. But I didn't feel like they were keeping with the characters that they are, if that makes sense. However, once I basically told myself, you know what, just read this not as a Pride and Prejudice retelling. Read this just as a generic historical fiction set during the Regency period about servants' lives, and then I enjoyed it a lot more. So even though there were all these nods to Pride and Prejudice and things would be happening that you were kind of hearing about, and I recognized those, once I was basically ignoring that and focusing on the lives of the servants, I liked it a lot better. We follow primarily one of the housemaids, Sarah, and she's a young woman. She's, I think, around Lizzie Bennet's age, and it's her coming of age story, and it's about her meeting fellow servants, one who comes to work at the house, and another servant who starts working at Netherfield when the Bingleys move in. And it's about her coming of age and her deciding what she wants in her life and how she can or cannot make that happen. And I found that part interesting in kind of just getting a glimpse of a servant's life in the Regency period and what that might have been like, and the ways in which servants might get stuck in situations. So yeah, when I stopped reading it as a Pride and Prejudice retelling, I started to like it. So I would say I enjoyed this, but you'd have to read it for the right reasons. Prompt number 5 was to read a work by a contemporary, and I DNF'd Ivanhoe. I just wasn't in the mood after I read a page of it, so I can't talk about that. And then the last 2 things were to watch things, and for number 6, direct adaptation, I watched the 2020 Emma, which I absolutely adored. It's one of my favorite. It's in the running for my favorite adaptation, and I just think that it got the casting right. The characters really felt like the characters as I read them in the book. I really enjoyed also all the other little bits, like the score and the costumes and the cinematography, and all these little bits to me really came together to give it like the right feeling. So I loved that. And then the last prompt was to watch a modern adaptation or retelling. And I watched Bride and Prejudice, which I think is 2004, 2005, right around there. This was a modern retelling of Pride and Prejudice. It's a Bollywood film starring Aishwarya Rai, and I really liked it. I didn't end up loving it because I thought the actor who played Darcy was wrong for the part. I don't think he was like charming enough. He was just cold and rude, and like Darcy needs a certain charm, otherwise why would anyone ever want to be around him? But I like how they played with the fact that the source of tension was between the Lizzie Bennet character, Lolita, and the Darcy character was kind of ignorance on his part. He's coming to India. His family owns like their hotel like moguls, I guess. And he kind of makes some snide remarks about like, well, I wouldn't put a hotel up in this town. And Lolita's like, well, what's wrong with here? Like, you just want to show people the like fake India, like the tourist centers, and you don't want to show them this beautiful town, and that kind of starts the tension. And I kind of liked what they did with that, but I just feel like the chemistry between the two mains wasn't there, mostly because of the actor who played Darcy. But besides that, I thought it was a lot of fun. I loved the look of it. I thought all of the other actors in the secondary roles did a great job, especially the actor who played the Mrs. Bennet character. I can't remember the family name, but I would recommend that one as well. Just know that I think Darcy doesn't feel like Darcy to me. But that's everything that I read and watched for Jane Austen July. Please let me know in the comments what you read or watched. And thanks as always for watching, and we'll chat soon. Take care.